Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to another Eternal News episode, as promised, here with the second part of the Promises by Firelight spoiler reviews. So yeah, before we dive in, make sure to subscribe down below for future content and news, and make sure to turn on the notification icon to not miss out. So let's take a look. Alright, so first off, we now know the campaign is going to drop this week, as far as I heard on Thursday already. So, as usual, even though we already, after this, have talked about half the campaign, I will do a regular review, especially because some of the evaluations change with a little more time, or simply because of the whole context of the entire campaign of some cards that we have not seen yet. Anyway, let's talk about this first. So Watcher Toda is a 4-cost 2/2 Praxis Totemite. Totemites are kind of like the new Grenadin-like dudes that are pretty adorable, kind of cuter than Grenadins even. Instead of tiny robots, they are tiny rocks, basically, from what it seems to me. There's not really any tribal payoff, so that doesn't matter too much, at least at the moment. But the card in itself is actually pretty cool. So while it is in your hand, deck, or void, and gets attack, health permanently, the amount is doubled. So for example, there is the Mentor, the 3-drop 2/3, that gives 4+ cost units in your hand +2/+2, turning this into a 6/6, so that's already pretty powerful, and that's one of the main the primary cards that I can think of that is really interesting with this. Obviously Warcry is doubled on this too, so that's also pretty nice. But the most interesting part is, on summon, you get to play a Totemite copy of Toda, basically. You get it has the same attack and health and the same battle skills. So giving these battle skills also has benefits. But yeah, even just playing a Mentor on 3 and then this on 4 means you get 2 6/6s for 4, which is incredibly powerful. Mentor has not been this interesting. I'm not sure actually off the top of my head if it's in Expedition right now. If it is, it's going to be super powerful, but I don't think it is, not entirely sure. But even in Throne, I think this could be pretty interesting. And I mean, there are other cards you can play alongside this that make Mentor interesting, stuff like Galai, or just Godosh. No, not Godosh, like Godosh Speaker, the time 2/3 might become interesting with Mentor, or just any other of the good 4 and 5 drops, like for example, Eclipse Dragon's pretty interesting. It's a 6/6 charge then, and so on. So there are a couple of interesting things. Maybe there's going to be like a mid-range aggressive Praxis deck with this. This card is super powerful if it is buffed, because even if you get like 2 4/4s for 4, it's pretty strong. This card is really, really cool and pretty powerful, so I'm pretty excited to mess around with this. So anyway, on to the next card. Next we have... About that. Wrong direction. Nope. Right direction. We have Kuro, Champion of Makar, the next champion. This one looks pretty solid. It's a 3-cost 3/3 quick draw, no relevant unit type. Your curses are fast, which is quite nice, like Permafrost being a 1-cost fast interaction alone is pretty sweet. Some of the clunkier curses become more interesting if you don't have to commit to them on your turn and can just do it on your opponent's turn. Especially in Expedition, this seems pretty interesting with Avigraph, because Avigraph suddenly becoming a fast removal makes it a whole lot better. So there are a couple of interesting synergies here, and the Mastery is randomly powerful. Draw 3 units from your void. It's obviously often not going to be very good early on, and you might trigger it without getting much back if you play this on 3 and attack twice, but that's fine. And later in the game, or you can even just choose not to attack or block with this to try and conserve the Mastery if there's not enough value to be gained by triggering it. And yeah, later in the game this can be super powerful. So yeah, seems like especially in Expedition, a pretty good card. I think in Throne it's probably gonna fall short, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, in Expedition, pretty cool card. Next we have Ixtal's Pendant, one of the spoilers from this weekend's ECQ. It's a 2-cost relic that gives you +3 maximum power, and cards in your hand cost 3 more. So there is some interesting synergy potential here with warp stuff. Not with Glimpse really, because you have to play Glimpse the turn you go off, and it costs 3 more, so it kind of like soaks up the 3 extra power that you get. But more like Warp Forge stuff with actual warp cards that already have warp. It also lets you use like unit abilities and stuff like that. Basically cards that you don't have to play from your hand. Stuff from your void doesn't really come up. There are no cards that you can play from your void, but it there might be like some interesting potential here. It's a pretty powerful effect, but it's also a very like unique and limiting effect. But we'll see if there's something. I think it's more the kind of like puzzle interesting card. Oh, sorry about it. Rather than a card that is actually gonna be like a top tier viable powerful deck probably. But we'll see, and it's a cool card to kind of mess around with and try to break. Then we have Eremot's Designs, another spoiler from the stream. It's a 2-cost spell that kills each unit with cost 2 or less. To put it in the words of my teammate Zach Hill, I don't understand why this card has to exist. Like, I just don't get it. Like, Hailstorm already exists and is a huge problem for actual low to the ground aggro, and suppressing it, and it's not the only issue. Like, aggro is not in a good spot. I don't think we really gonna long term have a tier 1 aggressive deck, especially in Throne, the way things are currently. Sure, Combrei was arguably the most popular or successful deck in a way in this weekend's ECQ, but that's because the deck was like easy to pick up, it was very visible and popular, and it's not a bad deck. Like, it's a very solid deck, but I'm not even convinced it's a tier 1 deck. It's probably a good tier 2 deck, or like one of the best tier 2 decks, and the format was pretty new due to the shakeup, and while the deck put a lot of people into the top 64, it didn't do very well in the top 64. So yeah, I would basically just assume the deck is gonna fall off a lot if the format matures. So I guess we get more regular shakeups now, potentially, which makes it more likely that in these early stages aggro can succeed, but once the format has settled, it always kind of falls off. And in large part it's due to too many 3 health 2-drops and cards like Hailstorm, so I really don't see why we need this card when aggro is already kind of like struggling. And this is going to be Expedition legal, which is gonna have a similar effect on Expedition as Hailstorm has on Throne. The other problem I have with this card is the card's not even that good. Like, if there aren't like actual aggro decks viable with a lot of 1 and 2 drops, this card is probably not even worth main decking. Like, it's okay, the opponent has a bunch of 2 drops and it kills these. Like, most decks have 8 to 12 2 drops, 1 or 2 drops, so there is a fair share of targets, but there are some decks where there isn't, so there it's really awkward. And it's also not efficient at dealing with 1 2-drop, because you spend 1 card and 2 power to deal with a 2-cost card of your opponent, so you're just trading very evenly, which is kind of inefficient. You can often do better. In Expedition, less so. Like, in Expedition, I think this card is much more widely playable than in Throne, but the card basically, just due to its pure existence, makes people not wanting to play decks that this is good against, because as soon as they do, people will just play a couple of these, because the cost of putting this in your deck is pretty low, and then you just get randomly blown out for free and the decks get pushed out again. So I really don't like this card, because it's not a good card, it's not an interesting card, a card that will not see much play unless people play decks that it's good against, and then people will just play this card and the deck ceases to exist, and people take it out again. So it's just kind of like a safety valve for something that doesn't need a safety valve in my opinion, because it's not a problem. So I'm really baffled by this card, and it's pretty pushed, and I really don't like it. Like if you think about Magic, for example, in Magic, the best things for this type of effect we get is either like Pyroclasm, which is like Lightning Storm. It's like 2 power, deal 2 damage to everything. So your premium early units with like 3 health and stuff don't die to it, or you get like 3 cost -2/-2 type stuff. And sometimes you get a card like Hailstorm, but that's usually only around for a while. And the thing is, Hailstorm is not generally too good. Like it's an interesting card to exist that just changes the dynamic of the format that it's in and makes a certain kind of deck much worse due to its pure existence. But then the card rotates out and the rules change again. But in a format like Throne, where that isn't the case, it just permanently suppresses decks that are weak to this type of thing. It's basically like a 3-cost Harsh Rule. And yeah, Harsh Rule costs 5 because it would be too oppressive on 4. So why do we get a Hailstorm, like an Anger of the Gods type effect that is permanent in the format that has the same effect on the decks that sweepers are the best against in a way, at least if they are cheap. And yeah, so stuff like the 3-cost -2/-2 that alternatively does Sabotage is a great card to exist. Hailstorm, not so much. Also, I feel like we have too many sort of pushed units in Throne, especially with like 3 health, making cards like Oni Ronin really bad, because as soon as your opponent plays their first unit, your Oni Ronin is already outclassed, which is not where you want to be, because you can't kill every unit with your aggro deck. And if you have to do that and you can't just attack into your opponent's units, forcing them to trade, you are playing a losing game. That's like how you beat aggro in Magic. You just play units that your opponent can't block, can't like trade with if they attack into them, and that kind of stalls out the game and lets you win because they can't kill everything. Maybe they can kill the first or second unit that you play, and then the third just stalls them because it happens too quickly. So yeah, not a big fan of this card, but it's gonna be a staple in Expedition and relevant in Throne as like a market option or in certain metagames. Next we have Gryphon Patriarch. It's a 5-cost 4/4 flying endurance. That alone is already pretty good, actually. But it gets better. On summon, you draw a card for each curse on the enemy player and their units. This card is amazing and honestly questionably pushed. I'm a bit worried about the card, like especially in Expedition. We have a lot of decent curses. We have Temple Shihan, we have Permafrost, we have Inflict Conscience, we have the Rider Outcast, which is a very good provider of curses. We have the 3-cost 3/1 Gryphon that makes 2 curses. So there are a lot of ways to provide curses, and I can already imagine sort of like a proactive Huru mid-rangey curse deck that just plays like Shihan, the 3/1 flyer, Outcast, Permafrost, maybe some Inflict Conscience, but I'm not even sure. Probably not. Probably some blue coins. They also provide a curse. And like Avigraft, another solid curse to play. And then this is easily gonna draw like 2+ cards when you play it, and it's just gonna be nuts. Like even if it wouldn't draw cards, like it would be very solid, at least in Expedition. And yeah, even in Throne this could be interesting. This card is super cool and super powerful to a point where I might be slightly worried about how good it is, but we will see how it plays out, and I'm excited to try this. Then we have Storm Tamer's Mount, the latest spoiler. This is kind of an interesting card and kind of cool. It's a 2-cost 1/1 flying ambush. On summon, it's invulnerable to damage this turn, so you basically get to block for free, either killing something with 1 health or helping to like gang block, or just trump blocking the biggest guy to not take damage. And get a mastery point on this because it has mastery 5. your flying units get Aegis, which is another nice thing. The problem is the card's a bit low impact probably, and not sure what Elysian deck would have enough flyers for this to do that much, and the mastery is kind of slow, so not sure how good this is going to be, but it's certainly not a terrible card, and it's a card that's kind of interesting, but takes a little to figure out if and how good it can be, and if there is a deck that wants it. But those cards are sort of the more interesting ones than the pushed ones that just kind of build themselves. So yeah, definitely an interesting card to mess around with, even if it might fall short in the end. We'll have to see. Alright, those are all the spoilers so far. Hope you guys liked the review. Let me know in the comments what you think. Otherwise, you can catch me from Monday to Friday live on Twitch, streaming Eternal and sometimes other things. All the information, Twitch and so on, you can also find in the description down below. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, one last thing. If you want to help support my content and other YouTubers, please consider whitelisting YouTube on your adblock or just turning off your adblock while consuming content on here. The creators really appreciate it and are grateful for that, because it's a great and free way to support your favorite content creators just by watching some ads. Alright, that's it again for this time. I'm your host ManuS. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!